which are completely unparalleled, and GPUs are the only answer. And then there's the challenge of simulation. So safety is so critical with self-driving vehicles, right? And a third-party, RAND Corporation, has generated a report that would suggest as many as 11 billion miles need to be driven in order to have the AI and self-driving vehicles be 20% more accurate than human driving as it relates to fatalities. Now, theoretically, if one said, let's use those test vehicle fleets that we have out there to just go drive 11 billion miles, well, it would take 100 vehicles driving every day of the year, 24 hours a day. It would take over 500 years. So it's impossible to possibly drive all the miles, and that's why simulation is going to be so important. And so we have to simulate not just miles, but the other important thing is we have to simulate every possible global driving condition and scenario that could happen. So it's not just about miles, it's about simulating every possible rare corner case of a situation. And have I actually simulated that? Have I tested that my AI is going to work in every possible environmental condition? Rain, snow, sunlight, varying levels of it. Every possible transient condition we think of it. And a car cuts in front of you last minute. Is the AI going to work? Is it going to respond to that? So it's a really complex challenge.
And what about, since like mapping is also an issue that you need to think about?
Yeah, and in order to do this well, you're going to have to be able to either incorporate mapping from third parties like TomTom or here, or build the AI perception models using LiDAR and radar and localization. So the complexity here is that we have to have the AI to support ingestion of mapping from third parties and or developing AI based on looking at the cameras themselves while the vehicles are driving.
And what's the big challenge with mapping for the auto company?
It's another AI that has to be developed, is a simple way to think about it. It's just one more AI model. In fact, multiple AI models that have to be developed at scale based on using all those images.
Okay, so shifting topics a little bit. So at the broadest level, how does NVIDIA add value and GPUs add value into this?
Yeah, at the broadest level, we look at the computational scale that's required. And the good news is, we've been building the AI and deep neural networks ourselves. So we're able to look at the computational scale that's been required for our own development. And we've already built that dense data center and have been using a Saturn V supercomputer. And so what we know is to be able to deal with that scale, the 2 petabytes per car per year, in the early days, 3 million images, eventually 20 to 30 million images, and then the turnaround times that are expected for the AI development, we know that it's going to require 100 or more DGXs just in the early days of the development efforts. And we know that from our own usage. And when we consider the scale that's required, those 100 DGXs, as we know, there's a huge value prop compared to an alternative that just really isn't a feasible one. So by comparison's sake, if we looked at the number of CPUs that would be required, 1 DGX is equivalent to 140 traditional CPUs. Right? Now imagine I need 100 DGXs. No CIO worth their salt would possibly consider trying to build that. Why? The value proposition is GPUs have a 10 times or greater total cost of ownership. The acquisition costs up front are 1/8 that of what it would be with CPUs. The space in the data center is 10 times less, and the power requirements are 20 times less. Now that really, in my mind, pales in comparison to the business value issues of if you don't have this computational scale in place and you're trying to develop the AI yourself, and you've publicly announced to the marketplace, as most of our customers have, I'm going to have an L3 by 2020, or I'm going to have an L4 vehicle on the road by 2021, and you miss the time to market promise, I would posit that customers, will be loyal for a while, but if they prefer a certain brand, and that brand is promised an autonomous vehicle, and they're not meeting their promise, they're going to shift their loyalty, and they're going to go somewhere else. And we know from experience that large brands, 1 percentage point of loyalty is worth $700 million in revenue to them.
Would you say
So
automakers
missing your time to market, huge revenue implications.
And would you say automakers are on track to meet their promises or they're behind?
I think most are struggling to meet their timing, and most are behind.
Would you want to be provocative with that in something like this? Or is it that would offend them?
You asked the question, so I answered it, but I think we need to be careful we need to frame it in a positive sense of AI and the computational scale that NVIDIA can deliver can enable you to meet your time to market promise. I think we should outline it positively, not negatively.
Okay. So then, you mentioned earlier, just to take it, so given the general value of NVIDIA and GPUs, to take it to this supercomputer in a data center. You've kind of answered it, but maybe I'm asking a little bit the question in the same term. So, what is the opportunity or the value of GPUs in the data center? I mean, what does a supercomputer look like? I mean, I've heard of this thing called Tostadi, basically. I mean, maybe just describe what does this data center look like, and then what is the value of NVIDIA in building it? Well, first of all, why would you build it? What does it look like? And then what's the value in building it?
Hopefully I've addressed the why you'd build it, but if I haven't, to be clear, this is
the data center. Well,
this is a GPU only problem. CPUs just don't possibly have enough compute speed to be able to deliver the type of turnaround time. So, we're talking about building 10 to 20 artificial intelligence deep neural networks where we're expecting 24-hour turnaround on very large jobs running from 300,000 to 500,000 images. CPUs just can't possibly get it done. Again, for every one DGX it would require 140 servers. With the TCO I talked about, no CIO would possibly build it. So that's the why, right? GPUs are really the only answer to be able to get the work done, right?
And there may be a bit of repetition from that point of view here but anyway.
I mean, you're not going to transcribe every word I'm saying.
Well, I'm going to transcribe every word, but that a journalist would ask it that way. They'd be asking it to make sure to see if you'll give the answer the same twice, and then they'd write the one that was most salacious. So anyway, carry on. So what's the opportunity in the data center?
Yeah, so if we look at, earlier I described the challenge, which is the challenge is data factory, ingestion of data. The challenge is AI training, simulation and testing, and to a degree mapping. What do we have to enable that? Our platform or reference architecture we refer to as Drive to Study, which is training, simulation, testing for autonomous driving infrastructure. What is it made up of? The modular components, if you want to think about it that way, are AI supercomputers, and you've heard me talking about the DGX1, and really it's the DGX family, because we now have DGX2 with even more power. It's the AI tools that allow our customers to be able to work with their AI programming language of choice, right? So NVIDIA has deep learning frameworks complete with Dockers and containers, and really to simplify it, it's the enablement of allowing our customers to use something like a PyTorch or a Cafe2 or whatever their programming language of choice is, and we make it easy for those to run on NVIDIA's AI supercomputers. So we're providing those frameworks to our customers via the NVIDIA GPU cloud. From a simulation and testing standpoint, NVIDIA's bringing to market a solution called Drive Sim and Constellation. What this solution will do is it's a series of two computers. The first one has GPUs and is designed to enable the photorealistic simulation required for simulating those billions of miles and all the different scenarios that I've previously discussed. And what, in combination with that, though, you want to be able to simulate what's called hardware in the loop. So you want to ensure that simulation is performing and running on the exact same hardware you would have in the self-driving vehicle or the system on chip. So the second computer would include our system on chip, be it Drive Xavier or Drive Pegasus. And the two computers will talk to each other 30 times a second. And one computer is generating the photorealistic simulation. The other computer is actually operating the AI as if it were in the back of a self-driving vehicle, except it's in this simulated two-computer environment, what we call the Drive Constellation. And in that way, what's happening in real time is we're actually simulating what it would be like if, in fact, vehicles were on the road.